From the previous movie, there's a couple of things of house cleaning that we need to do before we get into coding. So the first thing is, in the original movie, when I clicked on any of the buttons, I had a grayed out area in this area, which looked really nice. It actually gave a bit of depth to the interactivity. So you'll notice that it sort of separates you like a light box would in jQuery. So if I want to create that effect, I need to simply add a layer between the mask and the image. So if I click on mask and then add another layer here, I can create a rectangle. And this rectangle would be, I can make it anything basically at this point, because I need to turn it into a movie clip to animate it. I don't need the outline on this. So I'm going to turn off the outline value, and then I'm going to click the rectangle. I'm going to create a rectangle up here that is gray. And I'm going to make the fill for it. Oops, sorry. Let me go ahead and do it again. Let me actually make the changes before I change that. Let me make that to 50%. And let's see, boom. Perhaps a little darker. And I want to make sure that this is roughly the same size as my composition. So that is 940 by 340. And I want to make sure that I place it, I align it with the world. So actually, sorry, that was my mistake. I need to center it because I'm inside the actual movie clip. So let's do that. Boom. And that works well right there. Now, this is going to be a movie clip of its own. And so I'm going to call this the gray out. So I'm going to call it. And I'm going to make that a movie clip. So I'll press F8 and I'm going to make it a graphic. It can be a graphic, and I'll call it a gray out, not Gary, gray out. If I could type BG, and it's a graphic, that's fine. I'll place it there, and that's it. So all I need is for this to, when this animates, basically when this comes out, I want the gray out to already have been 100% by the time it gets here. So I'm going to create a animation in this layer. So I'll go ahead and say shape tween, motion tween for that if I want to, or I could just use classic tween. It doesn't really matter at this point. And I want to add a keyframe for alpha to that. So insert keyframe, and I'm just going to say all. So that should add a keyframe in that frame. Remember, I right click on the frame where I want to add the keyframe, then go insert keyframe from the flyout menu and choose what I want to add it. I said all in this case because I don't want to spend a lot of time focusing on that, whether it's a filter or not and whatnot. So let me go back to the beginning point of that. And remember, any changes that we make in a motion, on a regular motion tween, are based on the object, not on the keyframe. So if I change the alpha information for this right now, watch what happens. I'm going to go to color effects, alpha, and I'm going to bring the alpha information down. Now, because of that, it went down for the entirety of the timeline, because that's basically what that it's object based. I changed the object value. However, once I do that, if I select the keyframe itself here or select the object, I can go back and start keyframing, changing the keyframes for each one of them, and you'll notice that it starts respecting the values of whatever it is that we're creating for that specific keyframe. So when you see all the changes happening for all of them, that's what's happening. It's not like in classic tweening, which is frame based. And classic tweening, you change one frame, you only change that one frame, and that's it. In this case, when you do the first change, you're changing everything. You saw this when we were doing transformations on squashing and stretching animations a few videos ago. So that gives me that animation, and I want this to be behind everything. So I want to make sure that this mask and text area are on top of that grayed out. So there it is. And I want that animation to have happened before the complete animation of this. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that all of your animations should not be happening at the same time, because you run the risk of everything looking mechanical. So if you want things to be not looking mechanical but a little bit more organic, you want to make sure that you have a bit of a difference between the timing of the separate keyframes, so that way you have a more of a natural look to the entire animation. I also have, I think, let me actually go back to scene one, and not scene one, sorry. Let me go back to this animation, and I want to unlock this, guys, turn off the mask for just a second and go into the Buy Now button, this text area. I want to select that button, and I want to apply a drop shadow to that button. So I want to go into filters here by selecting the movie clip on the stage. I'm inside all the way inside the text area. And I click on that movie clip. I'm going to click drop shadow, and I'm going to change the values for drop shadow. Let me make them about 10 by 10. And I want to make the strength of this about, actually make them a little bit bigger, 20 by 20. And I want to make the strength of this about 50%. And so I just want, actually probably less, I just want an accent on that to separate it from the background just a tad. And you can change the distance if you want to by playing on this, by playing with the different values. So if I want to center, I will place 0 on that. That gives me enough of that little black glow to separate it. I can increase it or decrease it as necessary. So let me keep it at 20, and that's it for now. That is the housekeeping that we need to take care of. Now let's go back to Mark 1. Once this animation happens, because this is a movie clip, as you know, I need to stop that animation from happening. So I need to have an actual layer for actions. So I want to create a new actions layer at the very top. I usually maintain my actions layer at the top. You don't have to, but it's good practice so that you have access to your code as soon as possible. And then I want to stop this on the last frame. So I want to include an empty keyframe right there. So I'll select that frame. And from the drop down here, I'm going to choose empty enter key, blank keyframe. And that's what I did. And in that keyframe, I want to add the stop action. So to add stop action, I'll go to my actions window. And that is by going to window actions or pressing the F9 key. And then I can use my wizard to add the actions that I want, or I can use my snippets, whichever one is easiest for you at this point is what you should use. I'm going to use the wizard in this case. So I'm going to go add using wizard, and what I want to do from here is I want to stop the animation. This is what I want. So I'll click stop, and what do I want to do? I want to stop this timeline. That's what I want to stop. I am inside Mark 1. I want to stop that timeline when it plays once. So I'll click on this timeline, and then I'll click next. When do you want for this to happen? Well, I want it to happen with this specific frame. When you reach this frame, I want it to stop, and that's what I want with this frame. Finish to add, and there you have it. That is the code. So now let me take a look at that code really quick. What is that code? The code created a variable. It declared a variable called this, underscore this, and assigned this. This right here is the Mark 1 movie. The Mark 1 movie was assigned to this particular variable, okay? And then it's saying this variable stop. That means stop playing that movie clip. That's what that says. Let me remove these comments from here. We don't need them. And you can actually go through you should go through the comments because they indicate to you what the code is doing. So let me close this coding window really quick and see, well, this is not gonna do anything yet because we don't have the interactivity set up with it. Let me go back to the main scene, to scene 1, there it is. I am in that area and there is my stop action. So let me go ahead and make a mental note of what this is called. It's called close button. However, at this point, I would also reference my flowchart and see, okay, so now I have the animation. All the animation has played. Now what happens? Did you click on the Buy Now button? No, I did not. So then did you click on the close button? And that's the name of the button, close button. So that is a naming convention that would help me. So now that I know that that's called close button, let me go back again to scene 1 and start coding what happens here. First things first, my animation plays from the beginning to frame 30 is the idea, or somewhere around here is where I want it to play, to stop. So now I see that that animation is kind of weird now. I want it to be a little bit more elastic, so perhaps I want to go back and revisit that animation a little bit. You notice that it's too flat up at the top. So what I want to do is I want to first expand this, and then I want to go to custom and figure out what's going on here. So I want this to be changed slightly like so. Maybe bring this slightly down so that I get a little bit more flexibility. Whoops, undo that. I don't want that extra frame there. So if I want to hit delete, it'll delete that button, that frame. And go back and start fine-tuning this until I get it to where I want. If you're not getting the results you want, you can always go back to noise, and that makes it linear once again. And then go back down to custom and start playing around again until you get the curvature that you want. For some reason, this is going very flat up at the top over here. So let's go ahead and use one of the defaults. Let's try it, say for example, slow. That might actually work. Medium. It's still flattening my keyframe up at the top. So let me go back to custom and play around until I get it to where I want. If this is not working, let's say like in this case, it seems like it's not working, then you can start playing around with looking at the details as to what's not changing and why isn't it changing. In this case, the fact that this graph is not changing is indicative that there's something going on with the actual graph itself. So I would at this point probably try to add an extra frame here somewhere, just to go ahead and manipulate that animation a little bit better. And you see how that fixed the problem. The extra frame doesn't add any extra overhead to your animation or to your movie clip. It doesn't make it any heavier or more bits, but it does give you just an extra keyframe that you need to tend to in case you want to make a change. However, because this animation is it's a regular motion tween, then we can control all of the frames at the same time by simply going to the end of the animation and stretching it or shrinking it as necessary. So let's take a look at this. That's better. Now let's double click on that and close it. And now what I want to do is on frame 30, I want to stop this movie from playing. So I'll do the same thing I did on the other, on the previous movie clip inside Mark 1. I'm going to create a new layer at the top, call it Actions. And then I'm going to enter an empty keyframe here by pressing F7, selecting that frame and pressing F7. And inside that frame, I am going to apply an action for stopping the movie. Now I pressed F9 to open up this window, and then I'm going to use the wizard again. And I'm going to go to stop this timeline. And when do I want it to stop? At that frame. I want it to stop on this frame, finish, and add. You'll notice that it wrote basically the exact same code as previously. This equals this stop. VAR is the declaration for the variable. What variable? A variable that's going to hold the value of the entire movie, which is this. That's the entire movie at the top level, scene 1. So this indicates that's the name to be used in the code referring to the entire movie, this. And it's going to say basically the movie, stop it. When? Right here. That's when you hit that point, that's when you stop. Okay? Now, that's the variable declaration for this specific level. The other one was for the Mark 1 movie. Okay? So keep that in mind. The next thing I want to do is if I click on this, I want to jump to my, what did I call this frame once again? I called it Mark 1 frame. So when I click on this movie, which is called button 1, when I click on button 1, let's take a look at the diagram. When I click on button 1, then go to frame, Mark 1 frame, which is what I called it, and play the animation. That's what I want. So I'll go ahead and say when I click on button 1, that's what I want for my code. So how do I do that? Well, let's use the wizard once again. So I'll click use wizard. Let me open up this and I'll say, okay, I want to go to a frame label and stop. So I'll go to a frame label and stop in this timeline. Okay, and what's the name of the frame label? Mark 1 frame is what we called it, I believe. Okay, that's the name. I just typed it. And then I'll click next. When do I want this to happen? I want it when I mouse click. What am I mouse clicking? Button 1. So once I select that, that is the workflow, finish and add. You'll notice that, let me get rid of all the comments here. Like I said, you can keep them if you want to see what they do. And they actually help you quite a bit as you're beginning because they tell you what the code is doing. Sometimes they even give you instructions on how to modify it. So what did this add? Well, this added yet again another variable, this of type this. Since we had already declared it at the top, we don't need the second declaration. The second declaration is basically assigning the same value once again. So this is redundant. We don't need that declaration. We only want this if you were assigning a different value to this variable. Since we're assigning the exact same value, then we don't need it. So you only declare variables once. Now, what is the actual action? What is happening? Well, it's saying if I click in this movie at this level on scene 1, if I click on button 1, that's the name of this movie. When I click on it, call the function. And what does the function do? It goes to and stops mark one frame, which is this frame right here. Mark one frame. So that's what that code is saying. It's saying, hey, when I click on that, go over there and, go jump to that frame basically. So when I do that, let's test this movie really quick and see if this is working. I'm going to press Control Enter on the keyboard to see if it's working. There it is. There's the animation. When I roll over, I get the rollover state of my button, and when I click, I see my animation happening. So this is working. Okay, let me close that really quick and go back to Animate. So now, what do I want to do at this point? Well, I want to close the animation. I want to close that when I'm done with it, whether the only thing we want to code right now is closing by clicking on the close button. So how do I do that? Well, like I said in the previous movie, it works like HTML. So you have a reference where instead of having / to separate the different children within the hierarchy or the sub-level folders in HTML, you use dots. So if I want to make that happen, what I want to do is probably leverage this code. Let me clean the code so that I see it a little bit nicer. I need to reutilize this code to reference what I want to do. And that is, let me go ahead and make a copy of this code. I am going to select it. And then I'm going to go to the end of the code right after the semicolon. Remember, a semicolon closes a statement. And I'm going to hit a couple of times, and then I'm going to go paste on the same area. So now what I want is for this, in this movie, in this top level movie, there will be a movie called Mark 1, right? So that is where what I'm targeting. So that's my child, Mark 1. So I'll say this Mark 1, and inside Mark 1 I have a movie called Close Button, the one that we created for closing the animation. This right here, Close Button. So let me go back all the way to the top. Let me go to my code, and I'll say, okay, in this Mark 1 dot close button dot. So what this is saying is, in this movie, if I click on Mark 1, and inside Mark 1, if I click on the close button movie, call a function. And what do I want that function to do? I want that function to send me back to where this place is, which is frame 30. At this point, I should have a frame name here if I wanted that to be the frame name. So I could call it, I can create an empty keyframe really quick and call it main nav. So let's put a keyframe there, an empty keyframe. And I'm going to call it main nav. That is the name of that frame right there. So in my code, let me select the code again. I'm going to change, instead of going to mark 1 frame, I'm going to go to main nav. That's where I want to go. And you'll notice that the code is basically the exact same code for navigation. So what that's going to do is when I test it, it's going to tell me, okay, there it is. Click on that, go to the animation, and if I want to close this, click on that, and it brings me back to my main nav. If I click on it again, there it is. If I close it, boom, it goes away. So the coding is working perfectly fine. The one thing that I don't like is how crappy my graphics look. They look really pixelated. So that is an exporting issue with the actual movie, with the main movie. So let's go back and modify this. As far as the code is concerned, we are done. So basically this gives you navigation on your timeline, and you can do basically the same steps that we did for this one, you can do for the other buttons, minding that you're naming your movies according to what each movie is. So button 2 would be for the second movie clip, Mark 2 would be your second animation, close button would probably be close button 2, close button 3, close button 4, and so on and so forth. Now this is a long way to code. It's by no means the most efficient way to code, but it is a good way to getting started with the concept of creating code within interactive environments. So make sure that basically that you just keep on doing the same thing for all the others, and it should work fine as long as you reference both your flowchart and naming convention and the flows that you've created, just like we followed this one to create with the one flow for that particular part of the presentation. And then the naming conventions, obviously, to make sure that you put the proper names on everything. So let me close the actions window really quick, and let's focus for now, just to close, on the actual quality of this. So let me click on the gray area so that I deselect everything and I am at the dock level. And I'm looking at the properties for it. Under Publish Settings, you have the More Settings button. You also have access to Publish Settings under File, Publish Settings. So either one of the two is going to take you to the same spot. So let me click on this button here. And basically this gives you the access to how you want to handle the file that you're exporting from your presentation. Whether you want to have JavaScript HTML conditions that are specific to that particular thing, whether you want to loop the timeline. For us, what I want to do is I want to center my presentation to the stage on both vertical and horizontal. If you want to make it responsive, you would say which way you want to make it responsive. And the thing that changes the quality of what we're looking at, it's right here, the type of export for your images. Texture is the fastest way that symbols are exported on the easel.js library for the way JavaScript reads the actual images. So it makes it faster to download when you do this. Basically, it gives you, it creates textures that are low quality, but they download fairly fast. You can also choose to download everything, all of the images, into one single spreadsheet if you want to, and then the program will determine how to move that spreadsheet in order to provide you with the visuals that you want, creating a much larger image. But if you really want every image to be a separate asset, then you would say I want image assets, and that will maintain the quality of the images. Now you have access over here as well under texture to advanced image settings, and you can tell it, okay, I want better quality if I want to, or how do I want these things to be exported. That's the same thing as going into this tab over here and having access to where you want, what quality you want. Now you also can change where the images are going to be targeted, the bit quality of your images. So you have quite a lot of control over the quality of how you're exporting these things. Let me switch everything to image assets just by default. And I want to keep everything else as is for now. And then I'm going to click publish. Now, when I click publish, basically it just publishes the thing out. It doesn't give me a preview. It just exported the file onto my onto the folder, whatever it is that I'm saving this thing. If I name this, if I give it a proper name and save it somewhere, testing is the same thing as publishing. Basically, it will create for you an HTML document and a JavaScript document to go with it. So I'll click OK on this for now, and then I'm going to test it. Control Enter, and you'll notice that now the file has better quality images. My background is smooth, and when I click, the interactivity is still there. So that works fairly well for that specific marquee. So this is how you would create your timeline control animations for a presentation, either for an interactive presentation, by using code to manipulate the way you maneuver within that timeline. Once again, adding the extra animations is just a matter of going in, fine-tuning, and adding the extra steps. And I won't do that right now because, as you saw, this took about 15 minutes to create, obviously while I'm talking, but if I were to do the entire thing, it would take quite a longer time if I'm walking through the whole thing. If I'm not talking to anyone, it'll probably take me about 50 minutes to put everything together. But as you know, you have basically the breakdown and the workflow on how to create this thing for your presentations.